So today we're going to be talking about the urbanization and the increase in people moving towards the cities in the early 1900s. So this term we're going to be using is urbanization. Urbanization means the expansion of cities and or an increase in the number of people living in cities. So we're going to have this huge shift in where people in the United States are going to live. Before the 1860s, most people are living in rural areas. We're a highly agrarian community in the 1860s and before, where most people are going to be farmers. In the 1860s, only 16% of the population in the United States lived in towns or cities with populations of 8,000 people or more. After the 1900s, that percentage is going to double. More and more people are going to be moving into cities. As you can kind of see here, we have this huge influx in people moving to urban areas. By 1900, nearly 15 million Americans are going to be living in cities that have populations of over 50,000. A big reason why people are going to be moving to cities is the opportunities. We're going to have a lot of job opportunities for people to work in the factory industries or the service industries. So service industries are like maids, butlers, cleaners, things like that. We're also having a growing middle class. So as we're getting more people going to the cities, there's more money kind of circulating in our economy, and we no longer have just the super rich and the super poor. We're getting this middle ground as more and more people are increasing their personal wealth. There's also going to be a lot of opportunities for women in the workforce, specifically in cities. Women can start finding jobs outside of the home in factories. They can be boarders, so that's kind of like having a hotel where people can rent a room for the night. They could do piecework. Piecework is where you would sew clothes out of your home. They could be domestic servants, so maids. If you were an educated woman, you would have some opportunities to find work as teachers or as secretaries and typists before you got married. Typically, a lot of those positions were not applicable to a married woman, but if they were single and younger, they could. There's also the draw of entertainment and community. There's going to be theaters that are going to pop up. There's a nightlife in a city that you don't find in rural areas that a lot of people are going to find attractive. You also have this sense of community, especially for immigrants. A lot of immigrants are going to feel very isolated because they don't speak English. They're struggling with the transition from their home country to the United States. So there's going to be a lot of congregation in cities. You hear things like Chinatown, Little Germany, things like that. That talks about the community that's built around immigrant communities in cities. So who is moving into the cities? We've already mentioned before that immigrants are coming, again, for opportunities. A lot of workplaces, specifically factories, are going to recruit specific immigrant groups, whether they're focusing on in the city or if they're going over to Europe or China to promote their work abroad. Immigrants are often not going to speak the language, like I said, so they're going to have to take kind of whatever opportunity they could. So you see a lot of Irish immigrants going in and working in the railroad industry on the East Coast. A lot of Chinese immigrants are going to take the opportunity to work at the railroad industry on the West. You're going to see a lot of Polish immigrants going into a specific type of factory work, Swedish going into another. This is going to be ideal for them because they have job opportunities right as they come to the US, and factories are going to find cheaper labor than the Americans already in the US. You're also going to, like I mentioned, have those cultural communities of Chinatown, Little Italy, Kleine Deutschland, Little Germany, where they can have their cultural food, speak their native language, and kind of just have a support group as they transition to life in the US. It is not only immigrants moving to the cities, though. We also have what we call rural to urban migrants. These are people who are leaving the rural communities, leaving the farm, and going to the cities for many, many reasons. A big motivator for people to leave the farms and go to cities is this draw of cash. Consistent cash was not something you saw on the farm. Working on the farm, you would get paid once a year once you took your crop to market, and that had to last you the whole year. So life could get pretty tough, especially if it was like going through hard droughts or things like that, where there's not as much crop each year. It's also hard to come by farm work in a lot of situations. As families got bigger and bigger, they couldn't pass down the farm to everyone in the family. So younger siblings are going to need to find work elsewhere, and so they're going to turn to the city. There's also this draw for a lot of rural citizens for the excitement that you have in the city, similar to what we mentioned before. Cities are going to metaphorically blow up. They're going to increase in size at a huge, huge rate in the late 1800s, early 1900s. We have this increase in infrastructure where we can have larger buildings. We have this creation of skyscrapers for the first time as there's improvement in construction materials. We have stronger steel. Concrete's going to be invented in the Industrial Revolution. We're going to have this increase in transportation, water lines, schools, safety is going to be built up over the years within the cities. Education is going to allow new professionals to come about, specifically architecture. Architects were not a specific field before the rise of urbanization, but as the cities are getting bigger, we need people to design and build safe structures for the cities. So we're going to have this new art form of architecture, creating schools, libraries, train stations, office buildings, so on and so forth. A lot of the historic buildings you see in the East Coast, like in New York or Chicago, a lot of those come from the early 1900s with this increase in urbanization. Electricity is also going to greatly improve life in the city and allow for more people to live in the city. The old machinery that was used coal or gas, which is really dirty, really hard to live with. But as technology improves, we get electricity that's going to be a cleaner energy, quieter, more efficient, so able to support life in the city in a more convenient, nicer way. We also have cable cars that are going to be created with the invention of electricity, and these cable cars are going to increase mobility across the city. So people do not have to live within walking distance of where they work. So the wealthier people are going to start moving further and further out of the city center, leaving the city center for the grime and noise. They're going to leave that behind and turn to suburbs. Suburbs are going to start to develop more. They're not going to be as big as they will be after World War II. It's really when the suburbs kind of explode. But we start to see them being formed now of wealthy living outside of the city and commuting in to work. So there's a lot of positives with urbanization, but we also have some really tough situations and settings with urbanization. First, we have what we call tenements. A tenement is a multi-story building that's going to be essentially an apartment building. But it's a really small apartment. It's not what we see today. Their goal is to house as many families as possible. If you were lucky, you would have a multi-room apartment, but a lot of times you would have a one-room apartment, and not a one-bedroom, but one room. This right here is a picture of a tenement in the 1900s. If you see, you have the bed here. We're going to have kind of some kitchen materials over here. Here is the closet. That is their front door. The whole family is going to live in this one room. A lot of times people are going to work. If you're doing piecework, sewing out of your house, you would be working in your one room as well. Tenements are going to become incredibly unhealthy and dangerous. There's a lack of light and ventilation. Fires could spread quickly. So if a fire started in this house, the entire building and potentially those next to it would burn down. Diseases spread very quickly as well because there wasn't a lot of ventilation or separation between people. If someone got sick, it spread and eventually the whole tenement building could get sick. We also have struggles of water and sanitation. There's a lack of sanitation in the 1900s in the cities. So we think of cities being dirty and trashy today, with trash being on the street. It is nothing compared to the 1900s. There's no sanitation infrastructure, so no garbage trucks going around picking up trash. It would just be thrown in the streets. You would see horses that would die on the street would just be left there to rot until buzzards clean them apart. So you see kids here kind of playing next to a dead horse, and this was normal. Old buildings are not going to have toilets. The newer tenements will have toilets, but they tend to be shared toilets for the entire floor. So they're often getting clogged or broken. So you have this human waste issue also being thrown into the gutters. So disease is going to spread easily, especially in low-income neighborhoods where there is no separation, no way to create a system of hygiene between people. Private industries are going to see this problem and see opportunity. So you are going to see different companies trying to convince the government to pay them to bring in fresh water, try to create these systems to provide water and sanitation in the cities. And so you're going to start to see the government supporting these efforts. Fires, crime, and conflict are also a big issue with urbanization. As more and more people move into the cities, you're having buildings literally feet apart. So if there's going to be a fire, it can jump from building to building very quickly. In 1871, Chicago is going to have the Great Chicago Fire that is going to spread through the city, killing over 200 to 300 people and leaving over 100,000 people homeless. Governments and private industries are going to see this problem and start creating professional firefighters. At first, firefighters were privatized. So you had to pay a monthly due to the local firehouse. And then if your house came on fire, they would come to the house, see if their emblem is on your building, and then they would put out the fire. If you did not pay your monthly due and your house caught on fire, well, that sucks. You've got to try to put it out yourself. Crime is also going to be a big, big issue. So the government is going to start to create city police to monitor crime, especially at night. That's going to be more government-based at the beginning. And you're going to see streetlights as a way to help provide safety at night, to kind of help illuminate what's happening on the street so people felt safer. But you do see this rise in crime. This is a picture from the movie Gangs of New York, which is going to follow an Irish gang in New York City, where you would see fights. It's kind of dramatized, but it really touches on the racial, ethnic divide that is forming within cities. You're going to have race, class, and neighborhood loyalties. You're going to have immigrant groups staying loyal to themselves and viewing other immigrant groups or class groups as enemies. And we have this creation of gangs. A lot of power struggles and violence are going to happen on the streets as each gang is going to kind of fight for their own power, their own honor, in a sense. So violence is going to start to be rampant within the city streets.